guys? John from Mongo Fishing. Part 2 of interview with FLW Tour Pro Evan Barnes. In this video, we discuss if his tackle box is limited to 5 items, what would they be? Number 1 favorite bait of all time. If a tackle company came to him and said, we will make your signature bait, what would it be? We do a co-angler discussion about the importance of growing and developing as a co-angler. And then the age-old discussion of, do you catch your 5 fish and cull up, or do you just fish for 5 bites? That's episode 2. So stay tuned. Your tackle box is limited to 5 items. What are they?
That one's tough, you know, because there's so many different lakes. There's so many different, so many different applications. There's so many different baits out there, if we're being honest. To narrow it down to 5, I'm going to try to get pretty specific as far as brands and things. If I had my number 1 throughout the year, especially with the schedule like we're fishing that is very conducive to power fishing, I'm going to have to say a swim jig, just a 3/8 swim jig. And if I had to even put a color on it, it's going to be white. You know, I throw a Jig Suey that's been one of my sponsors for as long as I can remember. And Daryl and I actually, both of us kind of got together and designed that jig, hand-tied, powder-coated, big hook, all the aspects of a swim jig that you need. And I'm just going to say a white swim jig, just because I feel like that I can catch a fish on that any time of the year, anywhere. I mean, if I had to, that's my number 1. If I had to take one thing, that's what I would take.
What do you use for a trailer?
I use a lot of times I'll use a Strike King Rage Crawl. I'll use a Rage Menace. It just kind of depends on how fast and what kind of reaction that I want, how cold the water is, things like that. The trailer itself, I find myself switching it a little bit, but if I had to say what I throw the majority of the time, it's probably just a standard size Rage Menace. I like it. It's a little bit more subtle, probably a little bit more shad profile, you know. And being a white swim jig, I feel like that, the shad aspect of it is probably a little bit more closer to shad,
So do you put it on like horizontals where you got little things, or or you put it on more vertical where he's swimming his little flappers like a fish?
I have done both, but I find myself more than anything throwing it flat, just because a lot of times I'm skipping it, and it skips a little bit better, being flat than it does like that. But those days when I run out of them, you betcha, I'll turn it sideways. I might turn it all 4 different ways, just to be able to use that, use it a couple more times. But those are the days when you want to be out there, because it's good. It's really good. So that's definitely number 1. Number 2 for me is probably just a different jig, just a flipping jig, something that I can just flip cover and things like that. Again, probably just a 3/8 black and blue, something like that. And then either black and blue or like a natural color, a crawl color, some sort of little flipping jig. I've had a lot of success on that. Number 3 is going to be a square bill, just a standard square bill. I don't have one really that I always throw. I do one of my biggest things though, and I learned this at Texoma when I was fishing as a co-angler. I actually tend to go a little bit smaller than most guys, so I'll throw, say, like a 1.0 size rather than, say, a 1.5 or 2.5. But I get more bites, obviously, being a little bit smaller bait, but I also catch good ones doing it. I've won 20 grand on Dardanelle throwing a 1.0 square bill. My favorite color, if I had to choose one, would be orange belly crawl. It's pretty standard. Fish eat crawfish every lake in the country. You don't have to throw an alewife or throw a shad or whatever. They're going to eat a crawfish anywhere, anytime. So that orange belly crawl, from right now on to say spawn, I mean, in my opinion, that's the best color there. The best color there is. I change a little bit, but that's pretty standard for me. Being a square bill. So that'd be number 3. Number 4, I've got to go with the Megabass Mag Draft. That is something that we saw come onto the scene big time last year. When you look at the Elite Series at Kentucky Lake, look at it actually started back when Chris Daldane was catching them at Bull Shoals up there, where you guys are from, and caught them really good on a shad spawn. Kind of where it started, and I think it just kind of trickled its way down here, you know, we started throwing it a couple years ago, and man, that bait absolutely catches fish. You know, and I'm gonna say, you know, if you guys haven't tried that specific bait, you've got to, man. That bait absolutely will catch fish like crazy, and it's fun to throw. They will knock 4 foot of slack in that thing.
So for the guys that don't know what that is, what type of bait is that?
That is a 6-inch mag draft, Megabass mag draft. It's a swim bait. It's a solid body swim bait, but it's got a treble hook on the bottom of it. Okay. And with Megabass Innovation, it's also got a magnet in it. So instead of that hook being free swinging, that magnet will actually hold that bait, you know, or actually hold that hook up under the bait where you need it to be. It's a very good design bait. It's got these gills that are molded into the bait that are actually acting as like a weedless, you know, like a weedless,
like a weed guard?
Yeah, like a weed guard almost, yeah. And you can throw it, you know, through a lot heavier cover than what you would think, even having that treble hook on it. You know, and so I started throwing that last year, caught a lot of fish on it, specifically Kentucky Lake. We were there the week after the elites, and it kind of broke my heart a little bit that those guys kind of let it out of the bag, because I was licking my chops to go out there and throw it during the shad spawn, you know.
Right.
And I had an awesome practice on it, man. I caught a couple 5s and 6s, and I mean, it was really, really good, but the problem was we were, again, another week later, and that shad spawn was just going away, you know. So I didn't catch them that great during the tournament. I caught a limit right off the bat, but they didn't weigh nothing, you know, and got my teeth kicked in. But
that was the event that was that the one that Lambert just crushed the field, like beat everybody by like a whole day of fishing.
Exactly. And then you saw, you know, obviously Randy Haynes quitting, you know, and then just that big, huge story. That was the tournament that all of that happened. And looking back, you know, watching the show and everything like that, my biggest mistake was not really trusting my history there. And, you know, a lot of guys say that they want to forget about their history at a lake and go, you know, do something different. But for me, that really bit me, you know, it really hurt me, because I had some history in that lake way south at Johnsonville. But again, we were taken out of the dam. So it was hard for me to justify making that 2-hour run when I wasn't really on them as good as what I thought.
Right.
But Scott Martin ended up blasting them in a spot where I've caught them in the past, and another spot about 100 yards from him had to be loaded. If that spot had them, that spot had them, and I'm just like watching it, I'm sick. You know, I'm like, man.
He did an insane amount of miles.
He did, absolutely, and I've made that run 100 times. You know, and it's a big time gamble, but man, those fish just live down there in Johnsonville, man. They just do, and it's more of a river, you know, than a lake, and that's, you know, that's kind of my strength, you know, a little bit more of a river type pattern, and it was man, it was a big mistake, but again, like, you learn, you know, you learn every tournament you go. If you don't learn something, then you should never even really been out there, you know.
Right.
And so that would be number 4. If I had to say number 5, I'll go a little bit more broad. It's got to be, you know, going back to a topwater, you know, a whopper plopper or a buzzbait, you know, either one. And I'm kind of like you. I kind of interchange those hand in hand depending on what cover I'm fishing. You know, if I'm fishing a lot of slop, a lot of cover, I'll opt with a buzzbait, you know, not having treble hooks, because, you know, I can still skip it good, I can still bring it over grass and things like that. But that whopper plopper, it just, again, I mean, it just catches them. I mean, it really does. So that's probably my top 5 if I had to, you know, really narrow it down. But again, my 3, give me a couple of jigs in that mag draft, and I'll be good.
Right.
Yeah.
So, absolute, like, number 1 favorite bait of all time, any make and model ever that you've ever used or whatever in history. What is it?
Well, that's a tough one. As far I want to answer it in 2 different ways.
Okay.
Again, as far as, not to be repetitive, but if I had to just use one as my favorite, it's going to be a whopper plopper. I mean, that thing it's unbelievable, and especially when it first come out. I mean, it was nuts. And the really crazy thing about a whopper plopper is it was out for 4 or 5 years, and guys were looking at it like, yeah, right, you know, that's just a gimmick bait. You know, guys weren't even throwing it. Man, I had one for a long time, and I'm looking back, and I'm like, why was I not throwing that thing when I first got them? That's an old school bait that's been around forever, honestly. But River to Sea got it, and they made it in a bass version rather than a northern pike.
Big old musky version.
Yeah, musky version. But it's just it's so exhilarating just to see one destroy it like that. So that's probably favorite. But if I had to go back to a fishing aspect, all year long bait. And this is probably one I left out of my top 5 that recently I've started throwing. For me, maybe a chatterbait. That new jackhammer chatterbait. Oh, it's a great bait. And guys come in the store all the time and they ask me, what in the world would make you buy a $16 chatterbait over there's $4 and $5 ones, and honestly I'm like, look guys, I can't really answer that. As far as the bait's concerned, all the components are better than anybody else, period. There's no I mean, we're talking hook, keeper, hand-tied skirt, blade, all of that, paint, everything, all that's good. But to me, that doesn't make me spend $16 over this, because when you consider all those things, just those aspects, that fish is going to bite this one and this one just the same. But there's something different about that bait, and I feel like it's the way that bait blade hits the head. There's just some sort of noise that those fish they just love it.
It has a different shaped head.
Different shape head, and what you'll notice if you're throwing that bait, if you throw it all day long, you get it at the end of the day, the paint is gone off the head. It's knocking that paint off, and man, I honestly, I've designed chatterbaits. I've designed chatterbaits in my own that I used to throw and catch a ton of fish on, but you won't find another chatterbait in my boat.
Right.
And that itself, that jackhammer chatterbait, man, they done some awesome things. But I will say, one for you guys to look out for is that new Booyah Melee.
See, I don't like it.
I don't know. I haven't thrown it either, but Cody sent me a video yesterday. He's down at Harris Chain in Florida right now. He sent me a video the other day, or actually it was yesterday, and just the noise that it makes.
Right.
It's different, big time. It sounds like a rattle trap. It really has a totally different noise. So I don't know. They may not eat it at all.
Yeah. So I threw one for a while. They did a tackle review on it, and there was a few things that I liked about it, and a few things I didn't like about it.
Right.
And maybe that's just a conversation for a later time. Sure. But it didn't. To me, it helicoptered a lot when I threw it.
Okay. Yeah.
Like the blade doesn't lay down completely.
Yeah, I could see that.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It has a stopping point,
mm-hmm.
and so when I threw it,
yeah,
it would take off
mm-hmm.
and then stop and helicopter down.
I got you.
And I couldn't figure out why until I started playing with it and going, okay, well this blade flips all the way around
mm-hmm.
on the chatterbait, and this one stops right here,
mm-hmm.
and that's the only thing I can think of that would do that.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I haven't thrown it, but just to see that video and that noise, that was I was like, oh, they might eat that thing.
I caught a few fish with it.
Yeah.
So a tackle company approaches Evan Barnes, says, Evan Barnes, we're going to make your signature bait. What is it?
I gotta say, just going back to my number one strength is it's going to be a swim jig, and I think that's that's pretty standard. A lot of guys say a jig is a jig, but to me I gotta have confidence in something, and if you fished enough, you got to know that your stuff is your tackle is the best, really, or at least in your mind, right?
Right.
And so me having a lot of experience throwing a swim jig and knowing all the keys, the hook bends, the hook angles, the shape of the head, the weed guard stiffness. There's a lot of different things to a jig, and a guy thinks that it's just a jig. And I'm not saying you can't catch fish on any jig, because you can, but again, in your mind, you need to have every component and know that you've got the best of the best. And so with my knowledge and that just history of swimming a jig, that's got to be that I would have more expertise designing a swim jig than any other bait, that's out there. And so that would definitely be my, one that I would design, or if I had a signature, that's what I'd want.
Well, yeah, I mean, at your level, you need to know that stuff.
That's exactly right. And it's something, again, we talk about it, a conversation for another day. There are so many things out there, so many aspects that a guy starting where we were doesn't really understand that. they think, just take a bait, go out there and throw it, catch fish, or you don't. Well, as well as I do, you get in a boat with a guy that's really dialed in, he's going to kick your tail.
That's a
and
fact.
You can be throwing the exact same bait, exact same thing. You can be doing all those things, but he's got it right here. He's got that confidence, and it's a. I don't know how that transitions from here to where that fish eats it. I don't have any idea. I wish I did. I did know. But there's something going on there. I don't know what it is, but. If you spend enough time on the water, you'll figure it out, because you'll get your butt kicked if you don't have that confidence, and that's why it's so good to, start out as a co-angler and just learn, those things, because, man, there's a lot to learn out there. There's a whole lot to learn as far as, bait and tackle and rigging and all those things, about it. So,
speaking of the co-angler thing, so like last year, I did my rookie year, rode to the regionals. I didn't make the regionals, but the reason I did the year as a co-angler is because I was going to jump in head first, and be a front seater.
Right.
And two of my friends had said, dude, if you're going to fish the BFLs, do at least 1 year as a co. And so I didn't want to, but I did it, and I think I'm going to do next year as a co also. Because I learned so much as a co, good and bad. Right. But,
absolutely.
But you're still learning. Every event you're picking up something.
Right. I think we were going to, discuss that. Maybe some of my biggest advice for a guy that's wanting to live this dream. That would be some of my biggest advice is you can't spend enough time as a co-angler. You just can't. Honestly, I jumped to the pro side probably a little bit early. I had fished, pro events, and I had done good in some smaller tournaments like TBFs, and things like that. Won the TBF of Arkansas my first year fishing it as a pro, and so I kind of jumped out there a little bit quick probably. I spent the better part of 2 years, like you're saying, as a co-angler, but man, I look back now, and the things that I learned during those days are who I am as a fisherman today. That shaped me as a fisherman, and I had a lot of success as a co-angler, and that's something I feel like that you can gauge, and I think we've maybe even talked about it before. When you start finishing consistently in the top as a co-angler throughout the year, then you kind of know, okay, I can at least probably compete on another level, at the front of the boat. But again, you can't spend too much time as a co-angler, because good, bad, indifferent, whatever, you're always going to learn something. You're going to learn either what to do or what not to do, and that's some super valuable information, because once you get to the front of the boat, you don't have that anymore. It's you. It's your decision. You do this or you do that. It's not, watching somebody else mess up, And so again, like you can't spend too much time as a co-angler. I feel like I jumped out there a little bit early. I did jump out there. I fished the BFLs as my first year as a pro, and ended up finishing 6th in the points. Had a really good year, and felt like even I had a shot to win Angler of the Year. But even saying all of that, I feel like that I jumped out a little bit quick. And I could probably even say that as a touring pro. I may have jumped to the tour a little bit early. A lot of people will say that I did, just because it was the last 2 years I've struggled so much, as far as finishes and things. But a lot of what people don't see in those aspects are the way that certain people fish. And I fish to win every single time. And again, that may not be right. Maybe I need to tone it back a little bit and pick up that shaky head and start cashing some checks, and stuff like that. But that's not who I am. I want to go knowing that I've got a shot to win, every time. And I don't know if it's just guys like Thrift and Andy Morgan and all those guys. I mean, obviously they're way more talented than I am and more knowledgeable, but do those guys, what kind of mindset do they have? And I feel like that a guy like Thrift, he just wants to go out there and get him a limit every single time, and make sure he's got that 13-pound mark that we all try to get to, and then work off that. And maybe I need to focus more on that. I don't really know, but catching that limit like that, that's stuff that you learn as a co-angler. Bringing this all back, you learn all that, because how valuable is a limit as a co-angler? You've got to have one. I mean, if you don't have a limit, odds are you're not going to, cash a check or win for sure. And so that's all things that you learn how to do as a co-angler. And so that's why I feel like it's super important to start there and stay there, longer than you need to on it, or that you feel like you need to.
That kind of brings up one of those debates that go across bass fishing all the time is do you fish for 5 bites, or do you fish for a limit and then 5 bites?
Right.
And there's pros and cons to each side of
Absolutely.
it. Obviously, if you got your limit, then you can relax, calm down. You know you've got 5 fish. You've got points, if anything.
Exactly.
And then you can always increase. Or, you know, the flip side of why are you going to waste your time on those 5 if you're fishing for 5 anyway? 5 big bites. Why are you wasting time on 5 littles?
Yeah.
So I can see both sides of it.
Yeah. It's going to depend. It's going to vary lake to lake. You know, how many fish does the lake have in it? How big are the fish? You know, things like that. There's millions of types of factors, you know, that goes into that. But personally, again, I err to the side of trying to catch 5 big ones, you know, and it bites me a lot of times. You see, you know, my record, I'll weigh in 2 or 3 fish, you know. I mean, I'll do that rather than, you know, picking up some sort of finesse bait and catching me a limit. The limit aspect of it, it does something for you mentally. You know, once you get that 5th fish, you're like, okay, you know, let's do this, you know. And I think there's something to be said about that. But honestly, at the end of the day, the 5 biggest fish wins the tournament. You know, that's what wins. Is that what keeps you on the tour? I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet.
Right.
You know, but I feel like there's a happy medium there. You know, a guy that does good consistently all year long, he's catching limits. You know, whether that's because he's again at that skill level where he's fishing for big ones and just happens to catch a limit. You know, there's probably something there as well. But I don't feel like a guy that just goes out there and only focuses on I got to get 5 is going to compete as far as, say, a top 10 guy consistently. That's just my opinion, and there could be a lot of stats out there that disagree with that. Probably are.
I think last year's Forest Wood Cup, I think people were struggling to get their 5, and they didn't care what size fish it was as long as it was one of their 5.
Yeah.
But you had also guys that went out to fish big,
and that's why he won.
Yeah.
That's why Clint won, because he wasn't going to go do anything different.
Right.
You know, if he got 3 bites that day, he was fine with it. You know, he knew his 3 bites were going to weigh 10 pounds.
Right.
Well, he happened to end up getting 6 bite or 7 bite, whatever he ended up getting, and weighed in 16, and you win the cup that way.
Right.
You know, and it's when you're at the 3rd day of the cup, you can do that, right? You can swing for the fence, especially if, like him, you were at the very bottom. You know, what do you got to lose?
Literally had quit the year prior and said, I am done professional bass fishing.
Exactly. And you know, what do you got to lose at that point? You know, swing for the fence rather than just try to catch a limit. And again, it goes back to time of year, how tough is it, you know, things like that. There's a lot of different factors, but again, I tend to err to the side of, you know, catching 5, you know. So.
Again, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button's right down there. Looks like me holding a fish. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Drop a comment below if you have any other questions. Evan is a subscriber to the channel. We'll probably read them. Again, guys, thank you very much for watching. As always, get out on the water, be safe, and go stick some lips.